Okay, we have Dr. Renata in the house. What's your last name? What are you going by right now?
Professionally, it's Zambo.
Okay, Dr.
So yeah.
Renata Zambo. Okay. Um, yeah, so thank you so much for taking the time. For the listeners, just to give you some context, Renata is in her postpartum era right now. Baby is 5 months, is that right?
No, baby's 3 months.
3 months.
Yeah.
Newborn vibes. Oh yes, in
Yeah.
February. Oh, okay, yes. So an extra warm, loving welcome to you for taking the time because I know like the first few months especially are interesting to navigate. We were talking before we hit record and we were using terms like interesting, challenging, all these euphemisms for the chaos that is the postpartum period.
Yes. Yeah, it
um
is definitely an interesting time.
it's all of the things wrapped, like all the joy, all the bliss, all the chaos, all the, even the grieving and like the dark emotions that come with it. So thank you for
Hmm.
making the time to do this. And well, as we get started, I would just love for the listeners to know who you are and what brought you on this journey as a naturopathic doctor, and anything you feel called to share.
For sure. Thanks so much. So, my clinical focus as a naturopath is into the digestive and women's health realm. And I feel like these two pieces are so foundational for us for longevity and long-term health. And I got into naturopathic medicine kind of by accident. I always wanted to be a doctor, but when I was in high school, my mom developed sarcoidosis, which is a more like rare autoimmune disease, and was essentially on her deathbed. And the only person that was able to help her was a naturopath. And it was just amazing to see the transformation my mom went through over 12 months. And I just knew healing is possible for everybody, just in such a different capacity. And that's what propelled me to become a naturopath. And I love it so much because of the ways that we open doors for people where sometimes medical doctors just can't, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's such an awesome story. Intense.
It's a big one. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a really difficult period of time for our family because it's just so hard to watch a loved one go through something and not have answers and not have solutions.
Mhm.
And I love that I've been able to find through the work that we do as naturopaths that there are answers and solutions for people who are struggling with various along the very spectrum of what health can look like, right? Not only for ourselves but for our families too. It does truly extend into that, and I just think it's so empowering.
Mhm. Yeah, it definitely is, like, you're able to take control of your own health back into your own hands, and sometimes that can be overwhelming for people, but a lot of times it is empowering, like, you get a sense of, like, "Okay, it's actually up to me, it's not up to, these scientists in labs," although that can be really, really helpful. I have control and I can create the foundations for health so that I can thrive and, be live in my purpose and also be there for my family members in a longer and more vital way.
Mm-hmm. I think with the access to the internet, we're in such a different place health wise. We used to go to our medical doctor, and they were the trusted source for us and our health, and whatever they said was what we did. Now the tables have kind of turned, and we're getting information online. We're able to be advocates for our own health and take agency over the health and our bodies, and that is going to place us to move forward with a different mindset. And again, I think that's where naturopathic medicine can really excel because we operate in a realm where we also put health back in people's hands, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
be able to take care of our own selves.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so much of what I do when I see a patient is like, let's get back to the foundations. Let's get back to what you can do
Mm-hmm.
today. And that can make a big impact on your health. And then we can do the lab testing and we can do further investigation, get to the root cause of what's going on, unpack things. But there are things you can do literally today that will shift the way that you feel.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's so
Mhm.
powerful.
Yeah, totally. So you're definitely in the right profession, which is amazing.
Sounds like
And
it.
yeah, yeah. And it's amazing when like some of the most difficult journeys, some of the most difficult experiences that we can lead us to our life purpose or lead us on a path that we didn't even know that we wanted to be on, right? So it's great that like you were able to shift your life trajectory through that really difficult experience with your mom and see different possibilities that are available to us.
Yeah, it also does shape the way that I approach care. Like when I have a patient sitting across from me, I imagine that that's somebody's mom, that's somebody's daughter, that's someone's sister or son. And how do their family members want this person to be cared for, knowing personally what that was like? And I think that that allows me to really show up authentically for people, in a way, in a way of caring that is very deep. You know,
Mm.
um, it's not just people that come in and out of the door, but they're truly persons with lives. And that really, I think, having that experience is grounding for me in that idea of who this person is across from me.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
agree more. And I feel like you're such a heart-centered practitioner and yeah, anyone who is able to work with you, it sounds like they'd be very lucky to work with you and vice versa, right? It's a reciprocal relationship,
Mm-hmm.
which is beautiful. And even though there are a lot of incredible medical doctors, the system that they find themselves in can often lead to less of that connection that happens just because of the time restraints and the way that the system is structured. So I think we're really lucky as naturopathic doctors that we can spend time with people and we can structure our practice the way that we feel is most authentic to how we want to be as practitioners and as humans. So amazing, amazing, amazing to hear. With that being said, especially with care, I'd love to hear if you're willing to share your birth experience, because it's kind of like the tables are turned, right? Like you become the
Mm-hmm.
patient in a way, right? So I'd love to hear that experience, how that unfolded for you.
So I think for me, my birth experience extends far before I actually gave birth,
Yes,
because
as it does.
I did, yeah, which it hopefully should, right?
Mm,
There are a lot of different layers to pregnancy and labor and birth that we really need to be educated on. And I took a lot of time and effort to educate myself on the options that I had and what certain interventions meant, the pros and the cons, and why I would opt for certain things throughout my pregnancy, throughout my labor and birth, and afterwards. And being able to make informed choices was probably the center of my entire experience. I really wanted to feel like I was in charge and in the driver's seat of what was happening to me, because with being pregnant, like there's physically only so much you can do, right? You can kind of pad the sides of it with things that you have a little bit of control over. And so those are the things that I focused on. I think my personality type is I'm a little bit, I don't want to say extreme, but kind of. I'm a little like intense that way, that when I'm passionate about something, I dive right into it head first and like it
mm,
consumes my entire world. And
mm,
so I loved it. I loved getting educated on these ins and outs because I felt like it was really important for me. Um, and it also allowed me to educate my husband so that both of us were on the same page with things.
mm,
So before getting pregnant, I was really focused on um, setting up my body to be as healthy as it could be. I was exercising regularly. I was working on my mindset. I had my nutrition dialed in. I was focusing on sleep hygiene. And I did this months prior. So it wasn't like okay, we want to get pregnant next cycle. Let's like throw in a few things last minute. I really prepared months and months ahead of time. And to say that that was why I got pregnant when I did, it's hard to say, but I definitely feel like it played a crucial role in me being able to have um, the pregnancy that I wanted to have and
Mm-hmm.
the health that I was able to maintain throughout my pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. This
Um,
is before you continue, I'd love to just
yeah.
kind of double click on that point. So this whole field of preconception health, setting the
Mm-hmm.
foundation before you even start attempting, like actively attempting to try and conceive, setting the foundation so that if and when you conceive, that your body is in the most optimal state of health for whatever age you might be at. And ideally
Mm-hmm.
it's both partners, but you can only control yourself, right? But having,
Mm-hmm.
your egg quality being in the best state, and also the rest of your body being in the most optimal state, if you can, from what you can control. That makes a huge impact. I don't know if you know Dr. Catherine Yash on the podcast last week. She
Mm-hmm.
spoke focuses on fertility, and she was just talking about how important that is and how it can impact the epigenetics of the fetus, and how it can prevent, lifelong chronic diseases, including diabetes and things like that. So it's not just something that, like, I want the listeners to really understand that if you have the time and you can control certain variables, that it's definitely worth investing your energy in that preconception phase.
Yes, absolutely. Even taking things like a prenatal and fish oil far before, right,
Mm,
does have positive impacts on inflammation throughout your body, in regulating your hormones, in regulating blood sugar. And all of these are really important to maintain a healthy pregnancy, to have optimal egg quality. And it does absolutely impact the the fetal outcomes when we're looking at specific health markers. Um, because it takes time to grow a good quality egg. And so that means that months prior, we're impacting mitochondrial function, we're impacting the DNA of that egg. And the hormones that are supposed to be supporting that, right? The uterine lining. So there's so many factors when we're looking at pregnancy that extend before it. And I feel sometimes that it's a big area where women are underserved. Even if you look
mm,
at if we go into Shoppers Drug Mart and we pull off a couple prenatals off the shelves and we look at the ingredients, the dosing, the sourcing, the form that the ingredients exist in, it's just so poor. And it's such a
mm,
shame because we need those vital nutrients to sustain a healthy pregnancy. So for me, when working with patients, and I think you might be similar in this, that preconception health is so, so key and
mhm.
can do a lot for women. And I find like even with my own practice, when I'm able to work with women, 3 to 6 months prior to them wanting to conceive, often the outcomes just the experience is so different.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And like even for the birth experience itself, labor and birth, like the health of our
Mm-hmm.
tissues has an impact in that period, right? So if like
Mm-hmm.
even just like for the fish oil, the decreased amount of inflammation, it can really support our body's ability to open up during that time and then to heal in the postpartum period. So it supports you through the pregnancy, but also the birth and the postpartum phase as well.
Yeah, absolutely. To just say that something like folic acid is the be all and end all of a healthy pregnancy, I think it's very reductionistic. And
Mhm.
there are a lot of really key nutrients that are playing very specific roles through that process. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll get in. So you're talking about the preconception phase, and then
Mm-hmm.
when you say whether or not it supported me getting pregnant at that time or not. So did you get pregnant right away? Is that what you were alluding to?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I
Awesome.
think there's also I feel very fortunate because being able to get pregnant in and of itself is incredible, right? And then that 2 week wait that a lot of women are going through and wondering, am I going to be pregnant this cycle? And to have that perpetuate for multiple months, it can be really challenging. It's an emotional roller coaster. So I feel extremely lucky that we got pregnant as easily, in air quotes, as we
Mm-hmm.
did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and then once we did, I felt like my health completely changed because the first trimester kicked my butt. and 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 gone were all the super healthy foods I was eating because it just couldn't stomach anything. But I
Mm-hmm.
still kept certain pillars. So I was still taking a really high dose DHA fish oil. I was still taking a really high dose bioavailable B vitamin, not B vitamin, prenatal vitamin. I was using certain antioxidants as well. Like I was using NAC and I was using inositol just to support blood sugar and just pregnancy. So I was able to still have some things in place to support me while knowing that my diet was not able to fully carry me through.
Mm-hmm.
And that gave me a lot of peace of mind. And it's also one of those things that I tell my own patients is you don't really know how your body's going to experience pregnancy. You may have a really easy time. You may have a really terrible time. You may have a lot of symptoms, a lot of nausea, fatigue, headaches, and you kind of have to meet yourself where you're at. And I think that that's the beginning of parenthood. It's just such a humbling journey. You go in with expectations, and sometimes it's just not the way it's going to go. And you just have to learn to be okay with that in your own self. And so you make some of these concessions, but I feel like whatever patients are doing, if they can still maintain some of those pillars, it's super key just to support pregnancy and fetal development.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what I focused on. And then as I was able to, with tolerance, my diet improved and I was able to get active again. And I honestly had the best pregnancy ever. I loved being pregnant. And I sometimes felt like I couldn't even say that because a lot of people I spoke to just hated their experience. They hated being pregnant, which was so sad because one, I wanted them to be able to love that. And two, I almost felt like, I don't want to say shame. Maybe I am too much of a people pleaser and I didn't want to make other people uncomfortable, but I just loved it. I loved the experience of being pregnant physically. I felt amazing. I felt so beautiful. But I feel like a big part of that was that I made a very conscious decision that I was going to have a good pregnancy, that I was going to enjoy it because it's such a short period of time that we get.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a huge mindset piece for myself that every day I woke up and I just thought, I'm nauseous today and I can't eat anything. And I think that's so great because that means there's still a baby inside. And
Mm-hmm.
anytime I was kind of met with adversity, it was like this this reassuring grounding moment for me where I thought, it's okay that I'm having this because to be pregnant is such a blessing. And I feel like that mindset shift and the intention of wanting to be present with my pregnancy really shaped me to have a pleasant experience. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
that would be another thing that a lot of women might not be thinking of is like, how are we thinking about our bodies? How are we thinking about the experience of being able to carry life, of being able to, connect with our partner and do something like this together if we have a partner present with us. And just like what a blessing it is, even in the hard times, even in the hardships, that it can still be so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. That's such a beautiful way to reframe it and a really potent reminder of the sacredness that's taking place, right? Like you are holding a
Mm-hmm.
life in your body, and not everyone gets to experience that. And you chose this, like you prepared for it and
Mm-hmm.
you chose this consciously. And so, how amazing is it that you were able to remind yourself on a regular basis, even when you felt like you were nauseous and weren't feeling like yourself, and your body is changing and all these things. Like it's a beautiful process unfolding, and it can be uncomfortable, but even in that discomfort you can see the beauty and have reverence for the whole process, because it is, like you said, a short period of time, right? And so soaking it up as much as possible and savoring the way that your body is shifting and what's going on, and eventually feeling, you know, the movements of your baby inside. Like, what a beautiful process. And the mindset is a big deal. Like, it's not something to just gloss over. It's so crucial throughout this whole process for us. And because it also impacts our physiology. It's not just like, oh, I'm thinking positive thoughts. It's
Hmm.
actually impacting your body, it's impacting your baby, and it will impact the birth and the postpartum period as well. I had Laura Shanley on the podcast, and she was saying how a lot of women who might experience difficulties, especially in like early pregnancy, there is a fear of motherhood there. A fear of maybe like, I'm not going to be able to do this. I might not be a good parent. Maybe they had an interesting or dysfunctional connection with their own mother. And I'm not sure if
Hmm.
you felt this or experienced it, but so much while you're pregnant, it brings up so much from your own childhood and your connection to your mother. I
Hmm.
experienced that. Did you experience that?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So it can bring up those like even subconscious fears or thoughts that we've had that we've carried with us throughout our whole life, right? So the mindset piece is, again, it's definitely not something to gloss over. It's an important piece and it can really impact your whole experience. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Hmm. It, you know, it's, we're in a physical state where there is an outcome on the other end of it that is so unknown to us.
Mhm.
And, you know, everybody says there's nothing you can do to prepare for what it's like to have a child. And that's true because you've never been through the experience. And it's really hard to imagine what it's going to be like, who it's going to call you to be, how it's going to stretch you. And that can bring up fears, that can bring up excitement. It can bring up a lot. And it's coming for the most part, right? Like,
Mhm.
assuming everything goes well and there's no complications, at the end of it, you're going to have a baby, a life that you're entrusted with, and you have to care for them and steward them and raise them so that the world doesn't hate them and think they're a crappy person. You know, it's a big responsibility.
Yes.
And that can bring up a lot of discomfort. That can bring up a lot of anxiety, you know, because
Mhm.
even if we take children out of the equation, I think a lot of us at some point in our lives feel like, am I enough? Am I just enough for this world? Am I enough for somebody to love me or to like me or to think that I'm doing a good job or to be worthy of this career or this title? Um, and, you know, if we add a child into the mix, like, am I enough to be a mother? And I feel like the answer by default is yes.
Mhm.
I think for all women, it is. And it's not to say that it's not challenging, but I think we were designed to bring life into this world and we were designed to be able to care for it. It's there, you know, and I
Mhm.
think to consciously tap into our identity as a woman, our identity as an individual, I think can be a grounding place for what is my identity maybe going to look like as a mother, and also understanding that that's going to change too.
Mhm.
And again, like, thinking positively about it. I don't know if your experience was like this, but when I was pregnant, a lot of people were very ready to tell me how terrible, how hard pregnancy was and motherhood was. It's like we love misery, and it's not a phrase like misery loves company or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was just a lot that people had to say to me that was like, I'm pregnant. I don't want to be hearing about, you know,
Mhm.
all these terrible things, because what if they don't come to fruition? What if my experience isn't like that? You know, again, like,
Mm.
I had a great, easy pregnancy. I had an enjoyable time. I didn't experience the negatives of it. And I felt like there just wasn't a lot of dialogue around that. I felt like
Mm.
I wish that I had heard more uplifting comments around how pregnancy can bring you closer with your partner and how pregnancy can be empowering and how you can feel so beautiful through it, you know.
Mm.
um, wish there was more of that.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's twofold. There's this like um there's this way of talking about pregnancy and motherhood that doesn't make space for the incredibly dark, challenging moments that we have as mothers, as families. And and then there's this side that talks about, how horrible it might be, or women might have talked about like really bad experiences that they had. Um, because there's a lack of support, and that's our way of navigating through it emotionally and cognitively. But when we are supported, like both can be true, and we can talk about the difficulties in a very supportive manner. Like a lot of women
Hmm.
experience incredible mood challenges
Hmm.
after baby comes. They might not feel bonded to baby. They might have so much difficulty healing and breastfeeding and all of those things. And we do need to talk about that, and we need to support each other through it.
Hmm.
And at the same time, it can be true that you experience moments of euphoria and ecstasis and just feel so in touch with your body and your femininity and who you are, and get closer to your partner. All of it can be true. And it's even the positives are more amplified when we support each other, when we have this sisterhood that I
Hmm.
feel with you, that I feel with so many women coming together now to support each other through the beauty that it is an incredibly sacred, beautiful experience. And it can be so dark and so challenging and so overwhelming. So let's support each other through that whole spectrum. Both can be
Hmm.
true.
I
Yeah.
love that you touch on that because I feel like when women are pregnant, everybody loves them. Everybody loves on them, on their belly.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to touch it. Everyone wants to like hear how they're feeling. And then the baby comes and everybody cares about the baby. It's like the mother has somehow been forgotten. And as time goes on, like
Mhm.
the mother is even more forgotten.
Mhm.
Everyone wants to hold the baby. Who wants to hold the mom? And that's
Mhm.
that postpartum period is really for both. And the sisterhood of moms, I think, is really where a lot of that healing happens because we just have a different appreciation for what it's like, that journey. And
Mhm.
again, even if you've had an easy experience or a challenging experience, you've been through that fire, and there's that desire to want to hold someone during that transformation as they're going through it, because it's not like the baby's born, you become a mom, and then like that's it, you dust your hands and you move forward. Like there's
Mhm.
this continual transformation of us as we go through the journey of motherhood, um, from pregnancy and onwards, because I'm a firm believer that as soon as you get pregnant, you're a mom,
Mhm.
regardless of what happens. So we become moms when we're pregnant. And then how are we holding mom through that period? How are we supporting her? How are we nurturing her? How are we encouraging her through those dark times and also through times of elation?
Mhm.
And I think that is where other moms really leverage one another. And for me, it was a non-negotiable to tap into that during my early postpartum days because I didn't know up from down. I had the baby blues and it was so disorienting and so scary. And so to have other moms say to me, "Oh yeah, this happens. This happened to me as well. It'll pass. It'll get better." That "it'll get better" was not just a blank statement from multiple people. For me, it was something that I held on to so tightly, and it really brought me peace. And I feel like it is just so incredibly true that we will experience both, and that's an ever changing time, but really being able to lean on each other for support because we will need it, in celebration and in sorrow.
Mm. Absolutely. Yeah. I think like the common theme that I continually get presented with is just the support. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, no matter what your experience is, the support is what makes the difference. You can have you can have a very neutral to positive experience and feel incredibly isolated if you don't have, that village around us that we all need. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's like a safety net for the inevitable lows that we will feel as mothers, as parents, right? And so when you have that support surrounding you, it's just like like, okay, I'm having a really really hard time, but I can call on this person, or I can at least speak to someone and vent a little bit, or they can refer me or get me in contact with a professional if that's what's necessary at the time, right? Like, you just have this, like,
Mm-hmm.
as my friend Destiny Spurrell always says, like, you have this like spider web of a support network, which we need. Like, we're not supposed to
Mm-hmm.
parent in isolation. The term the village has stuck around for so long because we really do need a village around us. Our children need a village. It's not normal
Mm-hmm.
for our kids to just have, like, one or two grown-ups around them all the time. Like, we've evolved with multiple grown-ups who loved us and cared for us around all the time. So that in our human DNA, that's what we expect. That's what we gravitate towards. And in actuality, that's what supports healthy humans to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so that's why I think creating this community, creating the sisterhood is so important, because we will inevitably feel those highs and those lows on the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, we
yeah,
need that support.
yeah. Do you mind sharing the labor and birth
Yeah,
aspect?
absolutely.
Okay.
So I was planning for a home birth and um, again, had a pretty straightforward pregnancy, no complications, no reason to think it wasn't going to happen. Um, and at one midwife appointment, my my belly measured smaller than it should have been. Like it wasn't growing as how they were expecting it to. So I went and did an ultrasound, and she was measuring in the 11th percentile. And so to get dynamic information, I went 2 weeks later. So I was 38 weeks and 4 days at this point. And her liver was measuring in the fourth percentile 2 weeks later. So they didn't give me an overall percentile, but the OB who reviewed the results was saying that her abdomen measurements were way too small. So, for context, what's happening is the reason the abdomen is too small is because the liver is not growing. The liver is where we're storing extra sugar that helps to regulate us after we're born. And so there's more risk of hypoglycemia when we're thinking of that, just blood sugar imbalances. But I was also experiencing placental insufficiency, which I didn't know because I had foregone the first trimester screening. So that's usually when they're looking for Down syndrome and a few other genetic um, alterations. But they're during that testing in the first trimester screening, we're measuring specific blood markers. And some of those blood markers can tell us if there's a likelihood of having placental insufficiency. And I didn't do that testing. So we didn't know that I had these markers, or I'm speculating that I must have had them. Otherwise, why else would this have happened? I didn't have any of the risk factors. I wasn't a smoker. I didn't have preeclampsia. I didn't have high blood pressure. So they didn't really know why it had happened. But my placenta at 38 weeks looked like a placenta of 42 weeks. So it was
Mm.
significantly older. There were calcifications. And the OB pretty much was like, we don't even know if your baby can tolerate birth. So we need you to do continuous fetal monitoring. And I will say, I went with a midwife for a reason. I wanted, similar to naturopathic medicine, I wanted individualized care. I wanted evidence based, and I wanted a holistic approach. And I will give this OB credit. She was extremely kind during the entire appointment and really gave me recommendations that were individualized for me. So I had asked her, hey, we're planning for a home birth. Can I still do this? And she said she really didn't recommend it because worst case scenario is our baby would be a stillborn. So, obviously faced with such difficult news, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't really get a chance to debrief with my husband. And the OB said, baby's healthy today, but we don't know if baby's going to be healthy in 2 days or 5 days or one week. So she was like, I wouldn't want you to go past your due date, which was the following Wednesday. So it wasn't too far off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I remember I went home and I just cried about the news, and I just prayed, I just hope she comes today because she's
Mm-hmm.
healthy today. Like, I know that. I've seen her on the monitor. Everyone's told me she's fine. If she just comes today, I know she'll be okay. And I went into labor that night.
Wow.
Yeah. And I remember waking up and I just knew that I was in labor because I'd been having contractions at night, kind of like here and there, but nothing too serious. And I just knew, I was like, this is full labor. Called my
Mm-hmm.
midwife, debriefed with her, woke up my husband at 3 a.m. We had nothing ready for the hospital. The midwife was on board. She said, I think it's a good idea if we do a hospital birth. It's just safer and we can still make it exactly how you want it. So woke up my husband, and while I labored around the house, he would follow me around and do, hip compressions, and then he would steam some food and then do hip compressions and then pack our toiletries. So he was like, we were just traveling around the house in labor together, and he was just doing the things he needed to do in the various rooms we were in. And we stayed at home as long as we could. And I think one of the things that really helped me throughout my labor, early, because for me, early labor started and it never stopped. And it was like, I had to breathe through my very first contractions. Like, I was not
Mm-hmm.
really able to talk through them. So we like went into labor off the bat. And I had a hypnobirthing track that I listened to, and it was a hypnobirthing track for early labor to get rest. Because again, I was up from 1 a.m. and I didn't know how my labor was going to go and I hadn't really slept. So I was able to actually relax enough between contractions that I could almost doze off. So it allowed me to get rest for almost like 6 hours. And we just did this. My
Mm-hmm.
husband, he's a chiropractor. So, in addition to doing the hip compressions when I was having contractions, he was actually using his cupping set. So he would cup specific points along my back, to help with some of the labor pain, which was really
Oh,
helpful.
wow. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so I labored at home as long as I could. So I labored from 1 a.m. until 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't know how long that is, long time. And then finally we decided we needed to go to the hospital. So we packed all of our stuff. We went, and immediately, as soon as I walked in the hospital room, I was like, lights off. So they dimmed the lights. We
Nice.
put on music. I had like playlists that I wanted to have played during my labor. It was only my two midwives and my husband. So it was a very relaxing, peaceful environment.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were there for another 4 hours. And I was very specific about how I wanted my labor to look. Like, my team knew I was very stubborn on these things. I was like, hands off, no cervical checks, nobody talk to me, just let me do my thing, let me be in the zone. I went in super headstrong because I was like, my body was built for birth. My body was designed to do this. Just, I don't want anyone to fiddle with it. Nobody do anything. I didn't want an epidural, but things change when you get into labor. You're like, things got really intense for me.
Mm.
And I think maybe an hour into us being at the hospital, I was already like, I can't do this. And I needed the reassurance. So I allowed my team to do cervical checks. And I think that
Mm.
that actually did really help me mentally to continue to move forward because I was progressing really well.
Mm.
Um, Still opted out of the epidural, but they did have nitrous oxide. And I will say it's sort of a regret of mine of using it because I felt like it made me so loopy. It took me out of my brain, took me out of
Mm.
the headspace that I needed to be in, that I was able to tap into with the hypnobirthing playlists and the music that I had. And it actually made my contractions worse. So that's one of the things that I learned was when you're tensing your body, you're going to experience more pain. And so it's counterintuitive, but to be able to relax and release when you're feeling contractions actually does decrease. It's a pain management technique, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I felt like that really didn't help me.
Mm.
Um, it made things worse. So second time around, I would opt out of that one.
Okay.
Um, and then there were things that came up, like I had a cervical lip, and so we changed positions a lot. But the entire time, my team was so encouraging, and they really put me in the driver's seat. So when we had discussions around breaking my water, there was still we were still able to have a full consent conversation around why would this be beneficial for me right now in my birth. If I don't do it, what would the outcomes be of that potentially? So I felt like I was really involved in the entire conversation around what was happening during my labor. And my husband
Mhm.
was so on the ball as well that I think even if I wasn't able to be in the headspace to have that conversation, I trusted that he could be.
Mhm.
Um, and then when I finally was 10 centimeters dilated, we changed positions quite a bit just to get my cervix to dilate evenly. And my team knew I did not want to push on my back. I wanted to have as much room for my tailbone to move around. So we tried hands and knees. That didn't work. And then eventually we did a sideline position. And it's interesting because when I when they were like, okay, you're 10 centimeters, and if you feel like pushing, you can start pushing. I had a playlist that had all of our wedding music. So I was like, Tara, give me my phone while I'm like 10 centimeters like in labor hardcore. And I like put on this playlist because I was like, I know I'm just gonna be filled with oxytocin just listening to this music.
Aw.
And I look at my husband and he's just bawling his eyes out. That guy
Oh my
cried so
God.
hard during that entire labor process. So he's crying. I'm like in the zone. And I told my husband, like, you have to catch the baby. You have to be the first person who like brings her into this world. And so it was 23 minutes of pushing and full fetal ejection reflex. Like she came shooting out. And
Wow.
I honestly, and he caught her and put her on my belly. And it was the most surreal moment. I will say the ring of fire was an extremely intense experience. I think I thought I was going to die during it.
Hmm.
um, and that was another humbling moment because as part of my birth prep, I watched so many videos of women having these peaceful, quiet births, and I like trusted that that was going to be my reality. I was like, I'm going to be so serene, just bringing this baby up into my arms, and that was not the case for me. I was like screaming the top of my head off, and I had to like be okay with that. That was my story, and it didn't mean that I failed at birth. It just means that that was how it happened for me.
Yeah,
Um,
everyone expresses themselves so differently in birth, and if we have
mhm.
the benchmark as like no sounds and so peaceful and quiet, then like the women who like roar their bodies out and laugh their
Yeah,
bodies out and or their babies out and scream their babies out might feel like something's like not right, but actually that's just how you individually as a mother were able to bring your baby into this world.
yeah, yeah. That's a very, very true point.
Mhm.
And it was a humbling point for me. And yeah, and so other aspects that I really wanted, like delayed cord clamping, um, and I wanted that golden hour. It was interesting. I think I don't know if it was related to the placental insufficiency, but her umbilical cord was very short. So when they
Mm,
pulled her out, they could only put her on my belly because it wouldn't
okay.
extend up to my chest. And the cord was white by the time she came out.
Oh, wow.
So we didn't even need to do delayed cord clamping because she already got all of the blood, like it already drained out.
Yeah.
Um, and then once the placenta delivered, it was interesting because again, both my husband and I were in the medical field, so we actually looked at it, we touched it, we saw the calcifications, and it was so beautiful to see this like organ that your body grows for 9 months and then you don't need it anymore. Like how wild is that? It's
Yeah.
so incredible. It's so beautiful.
Yes.
Um, so we did skin to skin, and my husband got to do skin to skin with her, and it was just such a great experience. It's so surreal. I mean, you
Mhm.
hold this baby in your arms and you're like, how are you alive and on my chest? And where did you come from? Like, who are you? I think my first surprise was that she had hair. She has a ton of hair. She's like a little mohawk. And and I wasn't filled with this like I thought I was gonna cry. I didn't cry. I was more like I was in disbelief.
Mm.
And that was also one of those moments where I was like, do I not love my baby enough that I didn't cry with joy that she was born? No, this is my natural reaction, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything else afterwards was totally fine. Um, I remember being wheeled into our, I guess, like birthing or recovery suite. And the first thing I did when we got in the room, I was like, is there a shower? Because I really want to take a shower. And I stood up, and the nurse just looked at me and she was like, what? You want to take a shower? You just had a baby. And I was like, yeah, this is the best time to take a shower. I was like covered in everything.
Yeah.
And everybody was just like, you're a rock star for, championing that birth. And I was so proud of myself that I was able to have an unmedicated birth. And
Yeah.
it still ended up being similar to what I wanted. And if anything, was a lot more beautiful than I imagined a hospital birth could be. I think I was really afraid that a hospital birth would cause me to have interventions that I didn't want, and it would be very sterile and cold. And I think we were able to really make it to be
Mm.
exactly what we had hoped for. And it ended up almost being a godsend that we were there because we had latch issues from the get go. And like everybody just tried to shove my boob in her mouth. And she ended up having a tongue tie. We had a lactation consultant come the next day, and she was the one who identified it and was able to get us referred to a breastfeeding clinic. And we've had so much support from them. So it
Mm.
almost feels like everything happened for a reason, and we just ended up in a hospital.
Yeah.
And we were meant to have our baby there. And she came and she was fantastic. And we didn't know what we were doing, and we figured it out.
Yeah. As parents do, especially first time parents. No one really knows what they're doing, and somehow we figure it out. And I just like I'm so happy, like overfilled with joy hearing your story. I think what's important for listeners to take away, besides it just being an incredible experience for you, is that you really took charge and empowered yourself with information, and um, and created relationships with the practitioners around you, so
Mm-hmm.
that it doesn't always happen, but you felt like there was consent with any option that was given
Mm-hmm.
to you, that like you were able to actually speak about, like, is this going to be helpful for me individually, or is this just something that's done across the board. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that like you took such an empowered approach to everything, and you were able to pivot. So when something didn't go your way, which it inevitably does, for a lot of people throughout the labor, birth, and postpartum period, you were
Mm-hmm.
able to pivot and still create an experience that was satisfying for you, that was beautiful for you, because you had that previous education and training that you did, like with the hypnobirthing,
Yeah.
and you went
Yeah.
to the baby moon retreat that I hosted, and so you
Yes. Yeah.
brought so much of those little tips and tricks and the training that you did to the hospital environment, which I think probably made a world of difference for how things turned out for you. Um, and so I think that just speaks to, like, even in a hospital, you can create the environment that you want to, you can have the experience that you want to. It just
Mm-hmm.
requires that we are supported, that we're well informed, and that we have the resources that are necessary.
Yeah. I need to grab my baby. She's crying.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I go get her?
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. 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 She's like losing her mind. Hi.
So this is Sage is
Oh.
gonna join us now. Baby Sage, only
Oh.
3 months old. So, oh my goodness, she does have a little mohawk.
She
Oh,
does.
man.
Hi.
Hello, Sage. Hello, Sage. Oh, so for anyone who's listening on audio, head over to YouTube when this is posted so you can see Sage and her little mohawk.
Hi. Hi. I know.
So
Okay.
Sage is gonna chime in and discuss her own experience as she sees
Yes,
fit.
she's very opinionated about it.
Yes, I bet.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so I
Sorry, you were
wanted
saying.
to, yeah, I wanted to touch upon just your experience at the Baby Moon retreat. And then I did want to discuss a little bit about the microbiome, because that is kind of your area of focus as a
Hmm.
naturopathic doctor. Um, and so we'll go from there. So what did you think of the baby moon retreat? How was your experience, and how do you feel that it impacted your birth process?
I loved the baby moon experience. It was actually so healing for me, and I didn't even imagine that was going to happen. I know. There you go. I I think I have a lot of takeaways. So one was it was so empowering to be in a room full of women who felt positively around the strength of a woman to bring a baby into the world. That like permeated, it was physically tangible to me. And it felt really inspiring to be in a room with people who believed that, because sometimes, even if we, like for myself, I was really confident and knew what I wanted. I was very assertive. And still I had doubts like, can I do this? Is my baby going to be okay? Is my body going to be able to bring me through this process? Am I going to
Mm,
be able to stick with the wishes that I have for the dream birth that I want to experience? And I really felt like that was possible being in a room full of women who lived it, who encouraged me. And I think that was really beautiful. I loved the pond experience where we did a cold plunge in a pond because it made me overcome my fear of leeches. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
hello, can you hear me now?
Hi. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We'll edit that part out.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not sure what happened. I was like, are your earbuds?
Yes. I don't know
Okay,
if it
but
was
we're
me.
being
Maybe.
recorded. That's awesome. Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
Sorry, where did I leave off?
You
One, just
were
breastfeeding.
what I heard was that it was so uplifting to be in a room with women who really believed in the power of like you to be able to birth your baby and that your body was made for this.
Yes. Yeah. So I felt like it was such a beautiful, empowering experience because despite how headstrong I am, I still had doubts.
Mm. Mhm.
I
Yeah.
still had questions. Am I going to be able to do this? But I was in a
Mhm.
room with women who confirmed that it was possible. They were living proof of it. And even if they hadn't experienced it, they were still so encouraging of it.
Mhm.
So um, that was to have that like sisterhood from the beginning. The second part that I loved the most, I think this may have been the biggest transformative experience for me, was the pond dip, the cold plunge that we did in the pond, because
Mhm.
it made me overcome my fear of leeches, which is very intense because we had to dip into this pond that would definitely had a lot of leeches.
Yes.
And it was also a cold plunge, which was extremely uncomfortable.
Mm.
And doing both of those things just really ingrains this idea that I can do hard things,
Mhm.
and I can overcome intense fear and survive and come out stronger on the other end of it. And so if this is an intense fear for me, then what can my experience of birth be like, where there is fear and there is uncertainty? um,
Mhm.
and that was just like a huge awakening for me to experience that. And and then the art piece that we did, the letter that is
Mm.
in her nursery, and it actually brought to light some, I don't want to say anxieties, I guess like fears, worries that I had around her being in this world.
Mm.
And the fact that when she was in my body, she was safe. And I knew she was safe and I could keep her safe. And that the world is so hard and so challenging and dangerous. And I remember, I forget her name, she was sitting to my left. And you also said to me, like, but there are also so many beautiful experiences. There are also so many wonderful experiences. You know, the world
Mhm.
isn't all scary and bad, it's also amazing and full of joy.
Mm.
And that was a huge mindset shift for me and is
Mhm.
is still trickling through today. So
Yeah.
I felt like that baby moon was not like your kind of baby moon where you lay on a beach, you know, just have mocktails and like read a good book. But it was the kind of baby moon that I think all women should have
Mhm.
because it puts you as the mom first and it puts you in a space where you're getting ready to bring life into this world
Mm.
and who you can be through that process.
Yeah.
It was not at all what I actually don't know if I had any expectations going into it, but if I did, it wouldn't be that. It wouldn't be what I experienced. But I think it was so much more than what I could have imagined. And it was a really beautiful experience. And just to share it. And I liked that we had an intimate group.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, it was
yeah,
nice. Yeah.
yeah. After I left, I sort of had this like buzzing feeling in my body, like, like I felt like a new woman leaving that place. It was
Oh my
beautiful.
gosh. Yes, yes. I remember like those moments that you're talking about like are so vivid in my mind because it's that like that deep connection that you can have to someone on this journey when you can support each other through those moments of transformation where things really really shift for us, and a lot of women experience those same fears, right? Like when baby's inside of me, like I have control, I can protect, I can, do all the things, but I once baby's on the outside, it's like it's almost like you have to really surrender and let go of that control. And we hear about all of the things going on in the world, and so many of them are dark, but at the same time there's so much beauty and light in the world. And that baby moon retreat was like one example of that. Like we have the power as human beings to bring that light into the world, to care for each other, to support each other, and thus impacting the next generation. Like we made a difference in Sage's entry into the world, through that
Mhm.
gathering of women who just deeply supported each other and believed in each other and honored this sacred life event, this rite of passage, this matrescence when we go from, you're a mother as soon as you get pregnant, I agree, but then you're like, you go through that fire as you described it,
Mhm.
and you really enter this different form, this different identity, this different phase of your life. And having that support it makes such a world of difference. So hearing your experience just like fills my heart with so much joy, because after that day I was like, oh, this is the start of something really special, really
Mhm.
powerful. And I don't know if you
Absolutely.
remember something funny, but I remember like um the leeches like covered us, but
Oh.
for the pregnant women, for yourself and Melissa was also pregnant at the time, and you guys
Mhm.
had much less
Mhm.
than the rest of us. So there's something about nature. Like I don't know if it's like your pheromones or like some sort of like chemical signal, right? There is something about nature that is protective
Yeah.
to new life, right? And I
Mhm.
thought that was like so beautiful just to witness in real time, something very unexpected.
I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, me too.
And they were
So
baby leeches,
they
you
were
know.
baby. They were yes, it
How
was very
symbolic.
appropriate for the baby
Yeah.
moon. Yes. They were tiny, tiny. Um, so we're going to head off soon, but before we head off, I just want, because your area of focus is the microbiome, hormone
Mhm.
health, I'd love for you to just offer some of that wisdom to the listeners, whatever you feel called to share, whatever you feel is very relevant. Whether it's women who have cesarean births and that impact on the microbiome for their baby, or on any other aspect from preconception to postpartum.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's actually something I do want to talk about because it's something I talk about with all of my patients. And it's interesting because when I have patients who come into my office who complain of IBS, they complain of constipation and bloating and gas and um, you know, all of these digestive symptoms. One of the first questions I ask them is, how were you born? Were you born vaginally or by C-section?
Mm.
Um, because we know that when we're born vaginally, as baby descends through the vaginal canal, they're exposed to the different bacteria that exist there. We actually know now that even the fetus is exposed to bacteria in utero. And so that's kind of like the very first exposure that we get, but our microbiome is still pretty sterile as far as things go. So really the first seeding process happens as we're born vaginally. So it goes into the mouth, into the nose, we get it all over our skin. And so it begins that first implantation of the microbiome into our system and it begins to develop from there. So things to consider would be if you're having a cesarean birth, obviously baby is not coming through the vaginal canal, they're coming through an incision in the abdomen. So one thing that would be really important is to do active vaginal seeding. So the way that this can be done is a sterile gauze is inserted into the vagina prior to the procedure. And then once baby is born, one of the first things that is done is they're wiped with this gauze all over. They put it in the mouth, all over the skin, over the ears, and that can be one way that they can do that. The other thing that I would recommend. So sorry, let me just take a step back. So that would be for cesarean births. Now, let's say you don't get the opportunity to do that type of vaginal seeding. What is your alternative? The other thing that you can do is give a probiotic. So you can use, there are a lot of like baby probiotics on the market. So I would typically recommend for cesarean babies that they're given a high dose amount at the first feeding. So you can just put a few drops of this on the nipple, you latch the baby on, and then baby gets exposure to the probiotics. And typically with babies that are born by cesarean section, there's probiotics that are given routinely afterwards as well. But that first initiation can be a great place to add value.
Mm.
Um, Now, what are some other things that we can do to support baby's microbiome if they're born vaginally and they did get that vaginal seeding? That would be to actually not wipe the baby off. So this is common practice, especially in hospitals, but it's not to say that with home births you wouldn't experience this. Essentially, when the baby is born, they put baby on mom, and then the first thing people seem to want to do is dry the baby off and wipe off all the vernix. This may be to help regulate baby's temperature because they're wet when they come out and they can lose body heat really easily. But what I would recommend is leave all that good stuff on. Leave the vernix on, leave the amniotic fluid on, don't wipe the baby. Cover the baby with the blanket or the towel to conserve body heat and do skin to skin, and that can also help regulate baby's temperature. But all of that helps nourish the baby's microbiome as well. And that's something that you can do regardless of whether you do um, cesarean or birth, cesarean or vaginal. So I, if you are having a baby through cesarean section, I would recommend doing the skin to skin and not wiping either. And skin to skin can be done with whoever the hospital is willing to let them do it with.
Mm.
Doing as much
I have
skin to
a
skin with
quick,
mom.
yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I have a quick question. I don't know if you've come across any information of it, but I was curious for women who do water births. So baby is coming out of the vaginal canal and then entering water, which is quite likely chlorinated unless it goes through some sort of filtration system.
Mm-hmm.
And then, which is a beautiful, like I had two water births and baby, like I didn't give them their first bath for several days after their birth because I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to sort of contain the vernix caseosa and have their microbiome flourish that way. But I kept thinking to myself, because both my daughters had a little bit of eczema. And I was like, I wonder if like,
Hmm.
their first exposure was through water it was like town treated water. So there's likely chlorine in
Yeah.
it. So I wonder if that has an impact. I haven't heard anyone talk about it or discuss it. But yeah, I'm wondering what your take on that might be.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So I would do vaginal seeding or some sort of probiotic afterwards for them as well.
Mm,
Um,
hmm.
because it may be that whatever they were exposed to gets slightly washed away or exposure to whatever's in the water. And it's not just
Mm,
to say like chlorine, like fluoride is commonly in the water, right? Like we don't know how
right.
those things impact microbiome. I haven't looked
Yeah.
into the literature on this, but for me, this feels really intuitive. So I
Hmm.
would do low dose probiotic as support. And then same thing to what you did is just not doing the first bath right away. And I will say, when I was in the hospital, that was one of the things that the nurse said to me. She was like, "Do you know the benefits of delaying the bath?" And I
Oh,
wanted to
wow.
just pat her on the back, and I was like, "I do
Yeah.
know. I'm glad you know as well." Yeah.
Yes. That's
Because
so
I
lovely.
thought,
I love hearing a positive birth in a hospital,
yeah, yeah,
really love
absolutely.
hearing that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, as a side note, they had a card, I don't know where, probably outside of our door, that said, like, oh, my name is like so and so, the baby, like I'm breastfed. So we weren't actually offered formula, or like formula wasn't pushed on us, which I
Mm,
did appreciate because we really wanted to breastfeed. And it made it a lot easier to not have like a nurse pressuring us to like give formula, give formula. They just like, we brought colostrum to the hospital. They were more than happy to put it in the fridge.
mm.
And that was that. But anyways, that's a little aside. Yeah. So I
Wow.
was really pleased to hear that they were up to date on the new evidence of delayed bathing. And
Mm,
that is absolutely one way that we maintain the microbiome and we allow it to grow, and all the benefits of that vernix to infuse into the baby's skin to moisturize them is to just
hmm.
not bathe them. I think we didn't bathe our daughter for like a week and a half. I think we
Yeah.
did a towel, like we would do like a wet towel, but we didn't do like a full soap situation for quite a while because we wanted to delay
Yeah.
it as much as possible. I
I
think we like
know.
pushed the
And
extreme levels of it, of like what bathing delay would be
yeah,
appropriate.
as did I, but it makes that like, when we just love smelling a newborn's head. I was like,
Yeah.
it's like intoxicating. It makes that sense and those pheromones like so much stronger when you delay that bath. But I do know like a lot of like newborn photo shoots, for example, like I know some photographers, women come or the parents come like 2 days after baby was born, and so obviously there's been like a lot of bathing in between that because you're not going to have newborn photos with the vernix all over baby, right? um so just it's I think just like almost like a PSA, like keep the vernix on for at least like a few days if you can control that.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's some really big places, right, where you can impact your baby's microbiome that may seem frivolous in the beginning, but again, I'm asking patients who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, how are they born? So we do know that it impacts the gut microbiome, which impacts digestive health, it impacts immune system health. So if we're looking at things like the atopic triad, so eczema, allergies, and asthma, much more prevalent with babies who have a less than robust microbiome. If we're looking at, you know, many different body systems are impacted positively and negatively depending on what that microbiome looks like. So it's really important to keep it intact as much as we
Hmm.
can. And even with our
Hmm.
daughter, even though she was born vaginally and we didn't do bathing for some time, we kept the vernix on. We still gave her occasional probiotics, and we still do from time to time just to give her a little bit of a boost.
Hmm.
And I feel like it's a really important place that we need to focus on for baby health.
I
Um,
think so too. Yeah.
breastfeeding also gives exposure to the microbiome. So
Hmm.
again, if baby is formula fed or you're using donor milk, if you're able to get donor milk, then considerations would be adding in a probiotic as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree. Just because it can have such prolonged impacts on babies' health into adolescence and adulthood. Um, and and it's such a, like, if we can focus on it, during the birth process and the newborn phase, their first year of life, you're preventing so many things. The chronic ear infections that we see and that are always treated with antibiotics, you can, with other things, it doesn't just, it's not only probiotics, but you can prevent so many of those and thus prevent the use of antibiotics, which will wipe out their microbiome and they have to kind of start from scratch again. So if we pay attention to the microbiome since birth, then I just think that you're preventing so many things. You're also preventing the use of consecutive antibiotic rounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's twofold. And if you can breastfeed, that's so ideal. The colostrum in and of itself inoculates baby's internal digestive tract,
Mm-hmm.
and can have massive impacts positively on immune health throughout the rest of their life. And so these
Mm-hmm.
are some ways that we can focus on and nourish mom, support mom so that these things can take place, work with the body instead of against it. So a lot of these things can take place. Before we wrap up, I just want to say, like, if we can work with nature, work with our body, work with our physiology, then you're preventing so many interventions. You're preventing so many things for baby's full lifespan, and supporting the mother in healing well and hopefully bonding easily with baby, breastfeeding a little bit easier, and preventing a lot of those postpartum mood dysregulations that so many women experience because of what might have happened during the labor and birth, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
let's just support our physiology, working with nature, working with the body, which it really sounds like you empowered yourself to be able to do. And our outcomes tend to, not always, but tend to be a little bit more in line then with nature and with how our body ideally should function.
Mm-hmm. I think my biggest recommendation to anyone who is trying to conceive or is currently pregnant, get educated on what birth can look like, and get educated on the processes that happen during birth, whether you're going to have a birth in a hospital setting or a birthing center or a home birth. You should know what it is that is going to be thrown your way, potentially what you might encounter, because I think that's it. I think our ideas of what birth looks like and what experience is like is so different from what it can be. It can be really
Mm-hmm.
beautiful and it can be really empowering. And as you said, like so in line with nature, right? Like, and that's not to say that if you have a medicated birth that you're doing something wrong, but you can still have a really supportive, healing, medicated birth. But you
Mm-hmm.
need to be educated on what is it that you're going to encounter, what are the benefits, what are the potential risks, and knowing that you really can say yes or no to many of the things that are going to be proposed to you. and
Mm-hmm.
and I think that if you can explore these options, it will put you in a place where I think you can come to peace with your birth experience regardless of how it goes. I think it's a lot harder to go back and say, like, now that I know all of these things, I wish I would have said no to XYZ, or I wish I would have done this differently. And
Mm-hmm.
even myself, in having the birth that I did, I wouldn't say I have regrets. I just would say I wish there were certain things that went a little differently. Um, I certainly don't regret anything, but I think birth can be such a beautiful thing that I would love for everyone to be able to go into it just knowing what their options are. And that's so in line with what we do as naturopathic doctors. We're there to really give people the ins and outs and give people as many options as possible so that if someone's dealing with blood sugar dysregulation, their only option isn't metformin or other blood sugar regulating medications. Their options are diet and exercise and lifestyle interventions and herbs and nutraceuticals. Like there's so many other things. And I feel very similarly about birth.
Yeah. 100%. I couldn't agree more. And that kind of sparked the fire for me to create the Birth CEO portal so that women can feel like the CEO of their birth experience, of their labor, birth, and postpartum experience. Because, like you're alluding to, like you're in the driver's seat and you were so lucky
Hmm.
that everyone around you, your support team, treated you like that. Right?
Hmm.
And unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. But in reality, like it is our baby, it is our body. We're in the driver's seat. And it can make a huge difference when you're well informed, you're well resourced, you're well supported, and you're able to navigate things that are very in line with how you want to bring your baby into this world and pivot when things don't go your way and can still create
Hmm.
a beautiful experience. And if things are on the end of where you experience trauma, that's even more when we need to be supported and continue this cultivation of sisterhood so that we can heal from those things together and then still
Hmm.
experience motherhood supported and in that community, in that village that we also desperately need and deserve, really. Um,
Hmm.
so, Renata, before we head off, I always ask my guests, because I probably mentioned it to you at the Baby Moon retreat. There is this profound imprint that takes place when a new life enters this reality. So the first experience, the first impression, there's this imprint. And the work that I do and how you beautifully portrayed your journey into motherhood is so that that experience is imprinted with love and safety and trust. And that kind of gets into the cellular memory of babies. So Sage right now has that as its imprint, as her imprint. Um, and unfortunately, sometimes that doesn't happen. So then the imprint is lack of trust, survival mode, fear, right? And I do believe that that is kind of a long term thing, and we can do things to repair it. It's not permanent, but there is that need to repair afterwards. So if you were to imprint something onto our listeners, so it could be um, people in the preconception phase. It could be people who are pregnant, preparing for labor and birth, just looking for support and information, moms in the postpartum period like yourself, or even women who are entrepreneurial in spirit and want to birth something beautiful, a creative endeavor, a business into this world that is going to help and impact other people. What would you like to imprint onto those ears?
So this would be geared towards our preconception mamas and our pregnant mamas. And that would be that birth is truly like a canvas, and you are the artist. And you can put whatever it is that you want on that canvas. You can use whatever kind of colors, whatever brush you want. You can form it into the exact creation that you want to have. I really want to encourage and empower women to get educated on what birth can look like, understand the birth process, understand the interventions that are going to be recommended to you when you are pregnant, um, what's going to be recommended to you while you're going through labor, and know that you are the artist, you're in the driver's seat. You can say yes or no to anything or nothing or all of it. And really, really think about what do you want that birth to look like? Make it fully yours, create it to be exactly how you envision and dream it to be.
Mm, it's so beautiful. And and that phrase at the very end, like you can create it to be exactly how you envision it to be. Like I would just want people to really let that sink in because that is possible. It really is
Mm-hmm.
possible. You can co-create with your baby, with your support team, exactly the experience that you want to have. And I hope that hits the ears of so many people and gets amplified, because that needs to be in our psyche as mothers and mothers to be, that we have this power within us. So thank you so much, Renata, for taking the time to do this. An extra sincere thank you to Sage for just allowing this to take place. You breastfed her during this interview. She spoke to us a little bit during the interview. So I'm so grateful for both of you guys for taking the time to do this in the cocoon that is, the first few months of the postpartum period. So I wish you all the best, and I can't wait to continue to connect with you, because our sisterhood is real, especially since the baby moon. And I hope that you decide when you're ready to come on again, because I love all the wisdom that you just dropped to everyone.
Thank you so much for having me. The sisterhood is real.
It's real.
I will be back. Absolutely. Thank you for having
Yay.
us.
Thank you. Bye, Renata. Bye,
Take
Sage.
care.